Hi, this is Brass Check, and I guess we're going to go deeper into this Epstein story after all. Um, I think if you listen to the previous video that we did on it, audio really, you'll see we're way ahead of everybody on this. Some things that confirm my suspicions. Believe it or not, there was an ex-Israeli prime minister who was part of this circle. Somehow the U.S. news media left that little piece out. Also, amazingly, apparently the island has yet to be searched by law enforcement. New York has been searched. I think the Florida place has been searched, but the Big Island, no one seems to be touching it. And then finally, there's Les Wexner. I did a little more digging into him. He's the best buddy of Jeffrey Epstein. Huge supporter of the state of Israel. Gives them many, many, many millions of dollars, has been honored by them, is in deep with them. He is a real billionaire, unlike Epstein, who never was a billionaire. He lives in Ohio. We talked about this earlier, but just in case you didn't get it, he was an affiliate of Edward DeBartolo, who is the man that built more shopping malls than any other person in the history of the United States. The source of his money is very shadowy and shady. He operated a bank down in Florida, which law enforcement people believed was a front for laundering drug and mob and gun running money. So those two guys knew each other very well. And Epstein spent a lot of time out at Wexner's place, palatial, literally. In fact, the palace looks kind of shabby compared to what Wexner's got out there in Ohio. And he was out there with his little girlfriend, the daughter of Robert Maxwell, and they attacked some girls there. And one of the girls didn't like it and called the police. And the security staff of Les Wexner wouldn't allow her to leave the property for 12 hours. And you can find all this out in an article in the Cincinnati Enquirer, a Gannett newspaper. So this is not conspiracy stuff. So they finally let her go after 12 hours. Somehow the local police lost the police report. They say nobody ever complained to them. That's interesting. Very unbelievable. And then later, Epstein and Wexner, who knew this woman, threatened her. They threatened to ruin her if she told and came to the public through the media. Now, Les Wexner's been given a total pass so far on this story. His name, he comes up, oh, they had some kind of friendship, it was a long time ago, blah, 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 blah. No. Even after Epstein was exposed and convicted in 2008, they were still doing business. In fact, that New York house, a multi-million-dollar mansion on the Upper East Side, belonged to Wexner until 2011. So we are right on what's going on this story, and I don't think anyone is getting anywhere near us in terms of making this make sense. So we're about to make a whole lot more sense in a second. But there's one other sort of technical thing that I want to point out. If you're a billionaire or a millionaire or a guy with some extra cash, there's no problem hiring safe, attractive prostitutes in this country. Or, if you're a little afraid in this country, you go to Canada, or you can go to Germany, where it's legal, or Switzerland, So that's not really a big deal, right? No one needs Jeffrey Epstein to hook up with somebody unless you want to hook up with underage girls. All right, so let's look at the logic here. You want to control people. You want to surveil people. You want to get dirt on people. You want blackmail on people. Well, you could follow them around and try to figure out, which whorehouses they're going to in which country, and everybody's going to be going to a different one in a different time in a different place. And it gets really complicated, and the logistics is really hard. What makes a whole lot more logistical sense, if you're a high-level blackmailer, is to offer something that's not readily available. And that would be, of course, teenaged girls. And that is a dangerous business to be in. It's a complicated business to be in. And most people in the sex business stay far away from it because they don't want to get arrested and sent to jail. You know, they have to worry about that. Epstein and his friends so far have not had to worry about that. So what they were doing, because if you look at the reality of this, is Epstein's girlfriend was this Maxwell slug, and she wasn't a teenager. You know, so why the obsession with teenagers, and why the obsession with new ones and more and more and more? Like you pointed out in the original call, there's one witness, a victim, but also a participant later, who said she brought 75 different teenage girls to Epstein and Maxwell in Florida alone. So that's one girl in one location. So you know this was hundreds and hundreds of girls. Why? Why did they need such an amazing flow? They needed to create a stable, not for Epstein, but as bait for their blackmail scheme. And again, they couldn't just run a regular old whorehouse. That's nothing unique about that. No billionaire needs that. But by offering this, you know, perverted special service, all of a sudden everybody's coming to you. So you've got all these guys in one place coming to you. You've corralled them. And then it's been revealed in one of the reports that indeed there were cameras in all these rooms. And this is older than dirt, this kind of practice. This goes way back. So you're getting better reporting on this than anywhere, and I defy you to find anything better. Right? Listen to all the news channels, listen to all the alternative channels, and you're not going to get it laid out this clearly anywhere else. So now I'm going to do a little deep dive into history. This has happened before. Not in as grand a way, and the old CIA appears to be involved. So people that are very knowledgeable about this kind of thing probably remember way back when there was this weird episode where a group called the Finders sort of appeared on the scene and disappeared. And here we go. On February 4th, 1987, two white men in their 20s, each dressed in coat and tie, were seen in a Tallahassee, Florida playground. They love Florida. Playground with 6 white children aged 2 to 6. This is gruesome. Covered with insect bites and appearing very unkempt and improperly cared for. An anonymous tipster contacted the city police to report the apparent child neglect and potential abuse. The police officer dispatched on the scene questioned the two men, who claimed they were teachers traveling to Mexico to start a school for brilliant children. Remember, these kids were aged 2 to 6. When asked about the children's parents, the one adult willing to respond became evasive, stating the children, quote, were being weaned from their mothers, unquote. When the police officer informed the two men that they were under arrest for suspicion of multiple counts of child abuse, the man refusing to answer questions fell to the ground, feigning unconsciousness. At that point, after tentatively identifying themselves as Michael Houlihan, whose real name was later determined to be James Michael Howell, and Douglas Ammerman, who had no ID on him, both failed to cooperate any further in answering police questions. Later at the station, Howell pulled out 2 business cards, each with his 2 names on one side, and the statement written on the other alluding to his constitutional right to remain silent. In the park, there their nearby 1980 blue Dodge van displayed Virginia license plates. Upon closer inspection, police found this is gruesome, foul-smelling mattress in the back of the van along with maps, books, letters, 20 floppy computer disks, a device that can be hooked into a telephone line for computer transmission, a U.S. passport, and a pack of condoms. After all 8 persons were taken into police custody, a spokesperson described these half-dozen kids as, quote, hungry and pretty pathetic. By the way, all these things that I'm saying here appeared in the major news media, not that they're reliable people. Washington Post, Washington Post, Washington Post. So all these facts that I've just relayed to you. So this is not some, gee, wow, this is some crazy guy making stuff up out of thin air. No, this happened. This was documented by police, and the Washington Post was on it. A female witness alleged to have carried on a 5 to 7 minute conversation with one of the men at the park later came forth and testified that she believed the man she spoke to was on drugs. In the middle of winter in northern Florida, she said, he asked her if she knew of another local park with a swimming pool, presumably to bathe the visibly filthy children. After the oldest child, a 6-year-old named Mary Houlihan, possibly Michael's biological daughter, reaffirmed that they were being transported to a school in Mexico, informing police that they had been living at a commune in D.C. later determined to be the Finders, and that the cult leader referred to as the, quote, the game caller, unquote, later identified as one Marion Petty, would not allow the children to sleep in the house with the adults, but relegated them to living in outside tents. And again, as whacked out and crazy as this story sounds, well, these particular ones, some of the last little bits were not in the Washington Post. They appeared in something called Steam Shovel Press, which is a conspiracy magazine, but a pretty good one. All right, so where are we now? Mary claimed that they were only given food as a reward. They were also kept out of school and appeared unfamiliar with basic household items as television sets, telephones, typewriters, staplers, and even toilets. This anomaly stands in stark contrast with the adult Finders. In early 1987, prior to the Internet and private citizens even owning personal computers, the Finder members owned numerous computers and were highly skilled in utilizing the latest state-of-the-art technology. This night and day difference between adults and children clearly attests to the lowly status of the kids as subjective, abusively exploited individuals. Though Mary was the only child willing or able, this is a 6-year-old, to verbalize responses to police questions, the children were inadequately able to even identify themselves by name or the names of their 2 male custodians, which increased law enforcement suspicions that the 2 adults had kidnapped the children. One day after the arrest, the Tallahassee Police Department contacted U.S. Customs and the Washington Metropolitan Police Department to assist in determining both adult abusers and the children's identities and learn more about the Finders group that they represented. U.S. Customs was included due to the expressed intention of crossing the international border into Mexico, as well as suspected violations of the Child Protection Act of 1984. Since within the U.S. Customs Department, a child pornography and protection unit was already in place, the federal agency, along with the FBI, became involved. Based on initially seized evidence, the 2 men were suspected of, quote, and this is just horrifying, supplying children for the production of child pornography, unquote. Adding weight to these charges, an examining physician found that, in fact, the 2 eldest children had been abused. Additionally, Mary, the 6-year-old, had become somewhat agitated prior to the physical examination when asked if she'd been inappropriately touched by adults. The joint U.S. Customs Intercity Police investigation not only centered on the already firmly established physical evidence of gross neglect, sexual abuse, and crossing state lines with abused trafficked children, but also sought to determine if the children had been kidnapped and reported missing. The Florida arrest gave probable cause to obtain search warrants for 2 finders locations in Washington, a duplex townhouse in northwest D.C., where members lived, and a nearby warehouse where alleged finders' businesses were conducted in northeast D.C. that apparently also doubled as a place of lodging for some of them. Search warrants were also secured to inspect a number of finders' properties, totaling 600 acres. That included a 90-acre farm owned by leader Marion Petty, located 90 miles outside of D.C. Via State Highway 666, and the sleepy little quaint town of Culpeper, Virginia, in rural Madison County. Also, true to demonic Illuminati-like organizations, a local attorney in town representing a former Finders member in a messy divorce case received threatening, profane letters of harassment from Finders, had his tires slashed, and was forced to obtain a legal restraining order just to get the cult to cease its aggressions. Assigned U.S. Customs Special Agent Ramon J. Martinez joined the Washington Metro Police lead detective James Bradley, who had already been investigating Finders in December of 1986. And with fresh search warrants, they inspected the 2 D.C. Finders properties. So they had already been on the radar of police. 2 months earlier, an informant had divulged that the Finders cult regularly engaged in, quote, blood rituals and orgies. This is just so repulsive, involving children, and as yet an unsolved murder, unquote. And that one is footnoted. And let me see. Washington Post. Okay, that comes from the Washington Post. Officer Martinez conducted a search of the Finders' residence in northwest Washington, 3 short miles from the future Pizzagate epicenter Comet Ping Pong, and found several individuals on the premises, but only one Finders member, Stuart Silverstone, located in a computer room filled with computers. This is 1987. Printers and Finders documents that all proved very incriminating, confirming suspicions that the cult was in fact directly involved in global sex trafficking and sexual abuse of children. Now the following comes straight from the U.S. Customs report. Cursory examination of the documents revealed detailed instructions for obtaining children for unspecified purposes. Unbelievable. I mean, this is a customs report. I'm just going to read it as it is. The instructions included impregnation of female members of the community known as Finders, purchasing children, trading, and kidnapping. There were telex messages using MCI account numbers between a computer terminal believed to be located in the same room and others located across the country and in foreign locations. One such telex specifically ordered the purchase of 2 children in Hong Kong to be arranged through a contact at the Chinese embassy there. Also found were papers expressing an acute interest in banking secrecy situations, high-tech transfers to the UK, numerous properties under control of the Finders, a keen interest in terrorism, explosives, and evasion of law enforcement. So this wasn't some crazy guy, dreaming up wacko stuff. This was a group that owned, I believe it was 600 acres or 300 acres, had a townhouse in Washington, D.C., had a room full of computer equipment in 1987. Also hugely significant is the fact that within hours of the Tallahassee incident, Martinez discovered the confidential arrest records of the 2 Finders and 6 children taken into custody the night before. Wow. All right, So they just broke in. They just are searching. They arrested these people in Florida, and within days, or no, within hours, they're going through the office of these people in Washington, D.C., and they already had the police record. This unequivocally proves that intelligence insiders privy to on-the-ground actions in Florida tipped off the finders in real time that instantly relayed warnings around the globe. So if you can imagine, there were offices by this group all over the country. They all had telex machines because it was 1987. And within hours of this arrest in Florida, there was a telex appearing in Washington, D.C., and presumably in all these other offices with a copy of the police report. And let me see what the footnote for that one was. Okay, that's an independent report, but that's what he said. In the immediate aftermath of the Tallahassee arrest, Lieutenant Lee Hart from the Culpeper Police Department, that's Virginia, where the finders lead in Marion Petit owned real estate, stated that Petit, quote, would go to Andrews Air Force Base and get a military plane flight to China. This telling statement reveals that Petit enjoyed an intimate relationship with intelligence forces that included both the CIA as well as the U.S. military, and that would be the DIA, the Department of the Defense Information Agency, and was doing business with Red China, procuring 2 children in Hong Kong at that time. The finders was definitely not an operation. Was definitely not the operation of some 1960s pie-in-the-sky hippie commune holdout, as initial press had concluded based on the government official false narrative. Okay, so, something happens. They can't deny it because it appeared in the Washington Post, and real police came across it, police with ethics. And what did the news media do? They tried to paint these guys as a hippie commune, a little eccentric, no big deal. But definitely not that. Instead, they were a highly advanced government proprietary criminal operation. The finders' mastermind, Marion Petit, also rented rooms out in his house to foreign nationals. One, allegedly a Tianjin, China-born grad student at Georgetown University, the same school that longtime CIA operative, well, of course, Georgetown is CIAU, that's not anything new. Was this Chinese national residing at Finder's residence, and the Finder's purchase order of 2 kids in Hong Kong arranged through the Red Chinese Embassy purely a coincidence? Seems highly doubtful. Okay, on the next day, and this is a very fast-breaking story. On the next day, February 6th, Martinez joined Metro Detective Bradley at the Finder's warehouse location. There they found loads more documents describing, quote, explicit sexual conduct between members, including enormous collection of photos believed to be both Finder's adults and nude children. Now, this sounds a lot like Epstein, doesn't it? The big photo collection. And at least one depicting a child. I'm not going to go into this. A photo album exhibited a series of photos of adults and children dressed in white sheets participating in a blood ritual. Apparently, photos taken on the Petit Madison County farm showed 2 goats, often the symbol for Satan, being ceremoniously executed, disemboweled, skin dismembered. I can't describe the rest of this. You'll have to read it. Similar to the computer room at the residence, the warehouse also stored stacks of documents and files pertaining to Finder's activities around the world. To name just a few that Martinez noted: Costa Rica, the Bahamas, London, Germany and other European locations, as well as the Soviet Union, Japan, Hong Kong, China, Russia, North Korea, Malaysia, and Africa. Other file labels observed were named according to project members' names and locations. A couple of notable examples was labeled Palestinian and Pentagon break-in. Intelligence files were gathered on individual families, seemingly unrelated to Finders members, other than the Finders would answer ads for, they would answer ads for babysitters and tutors and glean, quote, as much information as possible about the habits, identity, occupation, etc. of the family. Immense amount of data on various child care organizations was also collected. This massive intelligence gathering data only makes sense for a CIA front whose primary mission is child procurement and global child sex trafficking. Petit was called, quote, the game caller, calling the shots on his trafficking network, graphically displayed not only in countless documents but also on wall maps of the world in every Finder's location. And I go on. Back in 1987, both the Northwest Residence and the Northeast Warehouse had installed large, sophisticated satellite systems. Each location also included a jacuzzi and sauna. The Finder's Warehouse contained a large library, 2 kitchens, and a video room that served as, quote, a training area for children and, quote, indoctrination center. The organization possessed the capacity and equipment to make their own videos, and based on volumes of the photos, their own videos as well. And you can just imagine what kind of videos they were making. Additionally, in the residential section of the warehouse, there was also an altar set up for occult rituals. And they've kept it out of the news pretty well, but on that island, in the Virgin Islands, there was a windowless temple. And the news media here is suggesting that that's where Jeffrey Epstein went to play the piano. Several more passports were collected during the search. Bizarrely, oh my God, okay, I can't go into this next one. Yeah, I can't. Some of the stuff is so graphic as to defy belief. Over the next 3 to 5 days, the Washington Metro Police Department was tasked with sorting, reviewing, and logging all the confiscated evidence. So this was a big project for the local police. Apparently, through a leak at the Tallahassee Police Department, the press in both Florida and the nation's capital were tipped off and snooping around asking questions as Martinez left the warehouse location. As the authorities carried out scores, that's 20 is a score, so scores of large plastic bags out of the warehouse gathered legal evidence. Where is that evidence today? Reporters were quick to notice that color slides, photographs, and photographic contact sheet. Some showed, oh my God, can't go into what they showed. You have to read it yourself. At the very next day, on February 7th, just 3 short days after the Tallahassee arrest, while Ramon Martinez was signing his 5-page customs report, the Washington Post was also breaking the big sensational story with the following headline: officials describe cult rituals in child abuse case. All right? This story appeared in the Washington Post. Unlike nowadays with the Washington Post blind denial and conspicuous silence on any pedophile ring still operating in our nation's capital, 3 decades ago, the CIA owned and controlled mainstream media rag openly asserted that something satanically sinister was lurking within the Finder's confines. The 1987 article reported that prior district court records indicated that a police source reported that the 40-member adult membership of the Finders cult conducted, quote, brainwashing techniques at the warehouse as well as the duplex. The source claimed that cult recruitment promised, quote, financial reward and sexual gratification, unquote, as well as, quote, explore Satanism. A court affidavit from the source also maintained that members of the group used children in rituals and that, quote, the children's grandparents feared for their safety. Despite all this clear evidence of child pornography, ritual abuse, and global sex trafficking, from the get-go, the writing was already on the wall, because less than a week after the two pedophile traffickers were in custody in Florida, the CIA-controlled D.C. Metro Police Department and the CIA-controlled Washington Post were declaring that the Finders were not criminals. Washington Post's February 10th headline read, quote, D.C. police Finders odd, quote, not criminal, end of quote. The day before, at a press conference at the D.C. Police Chief Maurice T. Turner Jr. told the world the bold-faced lie that the lifestyle, they were even using the lifestyle excuse back in 1987, huh? The lifestyle of the so-called Finders organization may differ from the societal norm, but so far the Metropolitan Police Department has not uncovered any evidence of criminal wrongdoing by members of the group. What we have here is the complicit stooges readily in place, simply doing what they're told, reading from a pre-planned script written by the perps in charge of the worldwide trafficking network, conveniently covering up their own heinous crimes. And lo and behold, those 3 to 5 days that the Metro Police would purportedly analyze the piles of confiscated evidence turned into more than 3 to 5 weeks. Not until March 31st, 1987, was Customs Officer Martinez contacting Metro PD's lead detective Bradley to assess evidential findings and presumably resume the joint investigation, with a meeting arranged for April 2nd or 3rd. But when Martinez from Customs showed up, that lead Metro Police Department investigator was nowhere to be found. Instead, his surrogate was instructed to, quote, only discuss the case on a strictly off-the-record basis. Martinez was told that after the Finders members' passports were handed over to the State Department, the D.C. police were told that they were all legal, and that since no improprieties warranted any further action, they were returned to the Finders. Incredibly, the whitewashed response belied the fact that the Finders' passport records show that they had made frequent trips to Moscow, North Korea, China, and North Vietnam throughout the Cold War, from the late 1950s through the mid-1970s. In other words, despite Finders being allowed to travel freely behind enemy lines during wartime, fraternizing and making business deals with America's so-called communist enemies, the State Department and CIA had no problem with their espionage activities. This fact indicates just more blatant evidence that the Finders was a covert CIA operation. This unbelievable turn of events was just the beginning. Officer Martinez's final report described what the Washington Metro Police spokesman told him next. And here we go. The individual further advised me of circumstances which indicated that the investigation into the activities of the Finders had become a CIA internal matter. The Metropolitan Police Department report had been classified secret and was not available for review. I was advised that the FBI had withdrawn from the investigation several weeks prior, and that the FBI Foreign Counterintelligence Division had directed the Metro Police Department not to advise the FBI Washington Field Office of anything that had transpired. No further information will be available. No further action will be taken. So just like that, the Finders investigation was suddenly closed. once again evoking the national security card. The Department of Justice ordered the immediate shutdown of the Joint Police Customs FBI investigation and was conveniently turned over to the CIA as a sensitive, quote, internal security matter, end of quote. All the blatant crime evidence was suppressed and denied. The half a dozen, this is horrific, children were returned to their 2 freed adult perps, and the CIA finders operation was back in business. Despite angry protest by the Tallahassee police, God bless them, the pedophile kidnappers in custody were promptly released from jail. That is simply the power of the pedophile empire in action that existed in 1987 as it still exists today. And I could go on and on and on. Petit stated his members did freelance journalism. I bet they did. I bet they wrote for Wired. Wired didn't exist then, but if it had, they would have been writing for Wired and NBC. Petit stated his members did, quote, freelance journalism, research, and competitor intelligence for a number of mostly foreign clients, but never for governments. And despite admitting that his late wife was a CIA employee and his son worked for the CIA Front Air America, Petit insisted that he had no ties to the CIA, claiming he sent his wife in to spy on the CIA. Petit also stated that in his interviews that over the years he rented rooms out to intelligence and counterintelligence personnel, including foreign operatives. And law enforcement has disclosed that a number of Finders members have been listed in the FBI's classified counterintelligence files. The CIA has even admitted that, quote, a few Finder members, unquote, were employed by a company that trains CIA personnel in computer software. However, standard CIA protocol calls for CIA or one of its numerous proprietary companies to customarily provide the agency's in-service training, rarely if ever outside private entities with no ties, as Petit claims. Despite the CIA and Petit's feeble denials over attempting to distance each from the other, far too glaring proof has shown that for many decades, Finders was an active CIA front operation operating a global child sex traffic network. Per U.S. Customs, in the U.S. government's own conclusive words, quote, during the course of the Finder's search warrants, numerous documents were discovered which appeared to be concerned with international trafficking in children, high-tech transfers to UK, and international transfer of currency. And on and on and on it goes. So this is a story for 1987. It was reported in the Washington Post. Scores of large trash bags full of evidence were removed from these places. People who saw it, including this one customs officer, said they included photographs of horrific abuse of children. And days later, the Washington Post was sanitizing all this and telling everybody, nothing to see here, folks. So how does this relate to Epstein? Well, he got away with it the first time, and we'll see what happens this second time. But a whole lot of people are getting away with it. Les Wexner, the billionaire from Ohio, Bill Clinton, and all the other celebrities and academics, Dershowitz, whatever his name is, they were all down there. They were all hanging out with this guy. and they're off target. All the focus is on Epstein. So as I mentioned earlier, maybe he's going to have a disease that ravages his body really fast, and it'll be just one of those things. Because once he's gone, this story absolutely goes away. He's just the bad guy. Nobody asks where all the money came from. Nobody asks, how many people did it take to run that island? There's no restaurant on that island. There are no stores on that island. It's like 100 acres or more. So you had to have landscapers and gardeners and maintenance people and housekeepers and kitchen people and people running, some kind of warehouse operation, just to keep basic things stocked. It was like a resort hotel. How many workers do you have for each guest at a resort hotel? A lot. Those people didn't see anything? I guarantee they did. I guarantee they're being threatened. So anyway, just a little historical perspective on how the world really works.